Hi. The monsoon session of Parliament ended earlier this week. Now, typically political coverage of Parliament sessions are so far removed from the average citizen that we simply don't care. I'm proposing we should, or at least try to. Let me make an attempt here. The monsoon session that would have typically been a month or so was shortened to 18 days due to the pandemic. It was originally slated to end on October 1, but the sharp rise in cases since the session started, around 30 MPs and 50 Parliament employees, meant both houses adjourned on day 10. Now, 20 new bills were introduced for debate and vote. 17 of those 20 were passed. 8 more bills were passed. These had been tabled in previous sessions. So in all, 25 bills were passed by both houses. Some were emergency ordinances. I'm sure you've heard of the 3 farm bills, a bit about the labor laws, and a bill that adds Hindi to the list of official languages of Jammu and Kashmir. There was also a bill that regulates foreign funding, a taxation bill which provides certain relaxations on tax compliance and provides for donations to PM CARES Fund to be eligible for 100% deduction. Now, where am I getting with all this? You know what they say about the devil being in the detail, right? Not one bill from those passed was referred to a standing committee in either house. Standing committees are an integral part of parliamentary democracy. They examine each provision that's within a bill extensively. In fact, they act as a check on bills that may have been drafted in a hurry. Most importantly, standing committees give a chance to MPs to voice their opinion on a proposed legislation without having to worry or without having the pressure to toe the party line. At least on paper, that's how it's supposed to be. Now, none of that debate, none of that nuance, none of that intricacy happened in this session. In fact, according to the PRS, on average, in this session, the Lok Sabha discussed a bill for about 90 minutes, 1.5 hours. The Rajya Sabha discussed a bill for just under an hour before passing it. In fact, the Rajya Sabha rushed through 15 bills in the last 2 sittings. Remember, that's the time opposition parties were boycotting the proceedings to protest the suspension of 8 members. So, 15 bills in 2 days with barely any MPs. That's 60% of the job done in the upper house. The Rajya Sabha chairman, M. Venkaiah Naidu, spoke about this when he said that if legislative work is not taken up during the boycott by some sections of the house, it may actually legitimize such a boycott as an effective instrument of blocking legislation. And I think that's a fair point. But how far should one go to make that point, and at what cost? Let's take the example of those 3 labor codes. You would agree they are crucial bills, right? Among other things, it makes it easier for companies to hire and fire employees. That was discussed and passed in the Lok Sabha within 3 hours. Only 17 MPs were in attendance. The Rajya Sabha did that in 1 hour 45 minutes with just 6 MPs. Now, there are rules, there are quorum requirements for the 2 houses, 55 and 25 MPs respectively. But between the pandemic, that opposition boycott, no particular attention was paid to the fact that the House was barely even in order when bills were being passed. Let's speak about order and disorder for a moment. Voice votes were a session favorite this time. From the motion seeking the suspension of 8 opposition members in the Rajya Sabha to the agriculture, the labor bills in the Lok Sabha, they were all passed by a voice vote. Opposition members protested and they asked for what's called a division of votes. That's when votes are counted and recorded in a transparent manner, electronically. A voice vote, on the other hand, involves members orally communicating their agreement or disagreement in ayes or noes. And based on which side is louder, the House Chair decides if the motion is passed or falls through. Of course, the voice vote is quicker, but it works for bills when there is a broad agreement. That wasn't the case here with many of the bills. A voice vote becomes even more problematic when there's chaos. This was also a session without question hour. The opposition barely asked any questions, and when they did, the government in many cases responded in writing that it had no data or no study or no assessment or no report. I want to take just a moment to quickly mention the CAG reports. That's the Comptroller and Auditor General. It's a constitutional authority. It audits the expenditure of the centre and the state governments. The government is actually duty-bound to table all reports of the CAG in Parliament. On the last day of the session, the government released not one, not two. Want to guess? As many as 29 CAG reports. These include 5 on Jammu and Kashmir, 3 on defence. It'll take us a little bit of time to get through all those 29 reports, but I want to flag 2 of them. One is a report on the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and it says that 75% of schools in 15 major states of this country have toilets that do not fit the criteria for cleanliness. The second CAG report, an extremely important one, and I'm wondering why it's not all over our headlines. It says that the government actually broke the law when instead of transferring the entire GST cess amount to the GST compensation fund, it retained it for other purposes. It retained it to use it for other purposes in the CFI. Now, the GST compensation cess is actually the right of the states. The Ministry of Finance has accepted this audit observation. Well, that's all we are packing in, but remember when this session began, we spoke a little bit about this. Parliamentary procedure, parliamentary propriety. Now clearly, it can be said one has rushed through this session, of course on account of the pandemic, but it's also been a session where the opposition has come without any stealth or any strategy. It's also been a session where a government with brute majority has chosen to pass bills in near empty halls. And obviously, it leads many of us to think that it's been a session which has been a bit of a facade. I'll leave it here. My name is Anubha Bhonsle. This is Newsworthy. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you are on Instagram, follow us on our handle Newsworthy with AB. If you've been watching, thank you for your time.